Welcome, everyone. Really delighted to have you join us today. We're very, very excited about today's program. I'm Steve Etzler with BDI. For those who are not familiar with BDI, we are an account-based event marketing agency, and we specialize in helping business-to-business tech companies attract their target audience through events, virtual, in-person, and hybrid. And that's what we do. Special thanks to my colleagues who are on the call. As you see, Stephanie and Jess for helping put this event together, as well as the rest of the BDI team. Thank you so much. Never could do any of this without you. Really grateful for your help. And of course, a very special thanks to our all-star speaker, Kerry Cunningham. We're going to hear from in a little bit. Let's just start with you introducing yourself. Actually, before we attack that first question, let's get to know you.
That's a great idea. So I spent about 7.5 or 8 years between those two at Serious Decisions and then Forrester before coming to Sixth Sense about 6 months ago, back in August. Prior to Serious Decisions, I had spent about 5 or 6 years outside of business after a liquidity event with a company I'd been working for a long time. I took a bunch of time off business and worked in academic research settings, scratched a few intellectual issues, and got a degree in organizational psychology. Worked at a bunch of really cool research labs. And that really fueled my desire to do the research director job at Serious Decisions. And at Serious Decisions and then Forrester, I was a co-author of the Demand Unit Waterfall. We started working on that 6 years ago, and that was really the beginning of our effort at Serious Decisions to say, this whole thing with MQLs is not panning out. It's just not what is working. And the reason that we would say it wasn't working is because that in that job as an analyst at Serious Decisions, particularly there were two of us, me and Terry Flaherty is my partner in crime there. We spent a lot of our time looking at performance of B2B organizations and specifically around demand or lead management. And the conclusion that we came to is that we could help our clients improve from what you would really have to consider god-awful performance of converting leads to revenue to something that's just slightly better than god-awful. Like, you know, if we really knocked it out of the park, you could get from a 1% to a 2% conversion rate, or 1.5 to 2.5, or something like that, with some rare exceptions. And so in looking at that this MQL to revenue conversion stuff was such a high failure rate activity, we did what I would think most of you would probably do. Looking at that every day, you're like, okay, that can't be right, right? This cannot be the right way to do it. We've worked really hard at doing it better. This just can't be the right process. And in the course of looking at our clients' data, which we're doing all day, every day, one of the things that really jumped out at us was, if you look in Marketo or Eloqua at the leads data, what you would find is that you have a ratio of leads to accounts of something like 2 to 1, or sometimes 3 to 1, where there are multiple leads from the same account at the same time. They don't all become MQLs, but they're people who filled out forms, they're looking at your content, and they're from the same organization. And you know, the minute you see that, you really can't unsee it. What it starts to tell you is that, and then actually, you know, an important part of the equation was actually looking at opportunity data from those customers and saying, okay, is there a relationship between the number of leads that you get from an account and whether or not an opportunity is created and whether that opportunity ultimately converts to something? And the answer is yes, there is. And that's really what got us thinking about what is it that we should be looking at instead of just the MQL, to understand whether a prospect is in market and we ought to be trying to sell them something. So that's a long I think that was just my introduction, right? But that's a long kind of way of explaining how we got to this point where we're saying, those MQLs, that doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah, well, that's, thank you for sharing your background. And that does answer that first question of why MQLs, in your opinion, are a thing of the past. So one of the next topic, the next question was something that I found fascinating in our prep call, which is the correlation between the degree of interest and the number of prospects within a single organization.
Yeah, and so this was really, getting at that question of how do we identify what, so one of the questions that I would ask our clients over the last 4 or 5 years at Serious Decisions and Forrester is, especially because people were starting to do ABM a lot, right? And so now I want to do ABM. Well, what does that mean? That means I'm going to focus more investment in trying to drive engagement and demand inside a smaller set of accounts, right? That is more highly targeted. It's a great idea. It's exactly what everybody should be doing. But if I also ask the question, all right, so what is that going to look like if it works? Let's say that you run your ABM programs and it works. How are you going to know? And the answer a lot of times would come back, well, we'll get more pipeline. We'll get more deals. We'll get bigger deals. Okay, but that may not happen for 6 months or 9 months or a year. How are you going to know if this thing that you're doing is working? And the simple answer is you're going to get more anonymous traffic from those accounts. And why do I say that? Well, 95 to 98% of all B2B web traffic is anonymous, right? So a simple way to look at it is to say, of all of the money that you spend to produce demand and to attract buyers, it's going to show up as anonymous intent, anonymous traffic on your website 95, 98% of the time, right? So a huge part of what you're going to produce is anonymous traffic. Okay, we'll set that aside for 1 second. The second thing that you're going to produce are more leads from those same accounts. And in your processes, if your tech stack is, I've got Marketo or Eloqua and I've got Salesforce, and of course you've got things around that, but that's the primary way that you recognize prospects and move them through. The problem is you can't see, if you get 5 people to come to your website next week instead of just 1 from that account, you can't see it in Marketo. Marketo's not going to tell you that that's happening. And probably what's going to happen is you get a first lead from an account and becomes an MQL, you send it over to your BDR team, they qualify it, that's great. What happens when that second lead comes through that same process, or the third, or the fourth? Well, we came up with a name for it at Serious Decisions. We call this second lead syndrome. So the second lead that comes through is going to go to the BDR, and the BDR is going to, they're probably going to go check in Salesforce and look to see if they already have an open opportunity for that. And if they do, what they're going to do with that second lead is they're going to mark it as a duplicate or opportunity already open and then send it off into the ether. So if you're doing ABM and the primary output of that from a marketing perspective is we're going to produce more leads from the same accounts, and then every one after the first one you throw away, you are throwing away the output from this ABM thing that you're trying to do. So for us, we're like, okay, first, everybody stop doing that. Again, if you're doing that in your organizations, stop doing that, right? If you have multiple leads from an organization, get them attached to the account and tell your sales reps about it so that they can operate on that intelligence. And then the second thing is when you've got a massive amount of anonymous intent on your website, which you undoubtedly do, you have to do everything in your power to legally find out where that traffic is coming from. What accounts is it coming from? Because if you've only got 1 lead from an account, it probably means that that account is not in market for anything. If you have multiple leads, there's a really good chance that there's a much better chance that that account is actually in market. If you've got 1 lead plus you've got a bunch of anonymous traffic, that's better than just having 1 lead, right? So the way that we wanted to evolve to look at this is to say there's various ways that we can identify whether a prospect's in market. They're not different ways of identifying whether a prospect is in market. They're really all layers of evidence about where we should be focusing our time and which prospects are really out in the market looking around. And the key is to be able to see all of those signals at once so that we can say, okay, well, here's a bunch of evidence. This prospect is in market. May or may not have an MQL, may or may not have traffic on your website, but the combination of the signals is what we want to be able to look at. Last thing on this that I didn't cover at first was we know that the buyer in B2B is a group of people, a team of people working together. So Clary, the vendor that does kind of forecasting and all of that, they have a record of all of the people who sales talks to, plus all the people that marketing talks to. And when you combine those two things, for deals over 250,000, there are 19 people on average involved in meetings and looking at content from a prospect account. And if the deal is between 50 and 250,000, it's 10 people. So there's a lot of people looking at content when their companies are going to buy something. It doesn't matter if they're all sitting in the room when the deal is signed. What matters is you see all of that as signal and you say, well, if there's only 5 people from this big organization, that's probably not a real hot prospect. If you see 15, now you want to pay attention. And so that's the shift. That's the transformation from just looking at one lead at a time, seeing the totality of the signals that we could operate on, and then being able to use and execute on that.
How do you find the sales teams receive that message? And what advice do you have for the marketers on this call to be able to present and get support for this type of approach?
Are there any salespeople in the room? All right. Well, I'm gonna go on the assumption that other than you, there are other salespeople, so we can talk. Interesting. It's so there's 2 ways the reaction happens. If you tell them that we want to send you opportunities and there may or may not be an MQL, you might get some looks, right? No, I want an MQL, I want, right? But if you also tell them, hey, we have this opportunity or we have this account and we can see that there have been 8 unique visitors from that account on our website this month, and we have 2 people who have filled out a form and are looking at content, but none of them are MQLs. Would you like to know about that? The answer will always be yes, right? This is the scenario that I paint for a sales team. I say, so think about this. Think of that target account that you love to sell something to. Somebody from that account comes to your website next week, they fill out a form and they download 10 pieces of content. Do you want to know about that? Sales rep, yes, absolutely. Okay, great. Same account, instead of one person coming and downloading 10 pieces of content, 10 people come and download 1 piece of content each next week. Do you want to know about that? Yes, and even more so than the first one. Okay, that's what we're talking about, because today your systems and processes are very unlikely to be able to show you that that's happening. They don't know what's happening. Another term we coined at Serious Decisions was buying group blindness. Like your systems and processes are blind to that activity. We need to be able to see that activity. And when we do, when you present those scenarios to sales and say, this is what we want to be able to show you. Now we're gonna try to get as many engaged people as we can, try to get as many MQLs as we can. But when I get an MQL, if I've got other people from that same organization looking at our content, I don't want to wait till those people become MQLs too. I want to say that MQL plus these people, let's give them to you at the same time. Now you can go work this account. So that's the kind of change of perspective. And when salespeople understand that, they get it. What they're afraid of is that you're going to say, here's an account with some intent signals. They're out looking around on the internet. Now go to it. Sales hates that, right? It's hard work. It's cold calling, and most sales folks are not going to want to do that. Now, the way we would look at it is to say, ideally, we'll have MQLs from that account. We'll have other folks. We'll have intent signals, all of this evidence, and that's what we'll hand to you on a silver platter. But sometimes, a lot of times, we may not have all of those signals. And so what we're looking for is what's the next best opportunity for you to work? And it may not have all of the signals that we want, but if it's got a good bunch of those signals, that's what we're going to give you. And now you need to be able to enable those sales reps to be effective with these different kinds of opportunities.
Thank you. I see a couple good real questions in the chat. Laura Powell, Simple Nexus. You just put a good one in there. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask it live, or do you want me to read it through the chat?
Yeah, so essentially, we automate everything as much as we possibly can. So as an MQL comes in, it follows our automation rules and is routed to the appropriate BDR team to follow up on. Now it's sounding like, with these various tools to uncover intent and buying signals and things like that, that might be like a manual process in order to deliver that information to sales. Is there a way to automate that, or what do you guys, have done in the past?
Absolutely. So there are a few different options. I'll start with the kind of in a crawl, walk, run fashion. So so a lot of organizations already have some lead to account matching. Do you have that's doing the routing?
Yes.
So that's, first of all, that's the key. So if all leads are getting matched to accounts so that that lead is attached to that account, what I would recommend is if you have your MQL process in place, then what we're going to change is actually the instruction to the BDR team or the sales team. So you're already matching the leads to the accounts, they're there. The MQL comes through, you send it to the BDR team and say, go take action on this. The next thing we want the BDR to do is go to the account, see the other contacts there, and ideally, and this is, we wrote papers on this back at Forrester, which you can find, but what we want you to do is open up an opportunity, or that BDR to open an opportunity, attach those multiple people to it, and go work them together. And we had a great case study with a company called Metadata that did exactly that. Their BDRs doubled their productivity per period of time. Because now I'm not chasing every individual person who comes along. If I get 3 people from the same buying team and they're on an opportunity, I talk to one, I don't have to talk to the other ones. I don't have to chase them down. I can also use the fact that there's 3 of them to guide my effort. Like if there's only one lead and it's from a good account, you're going to run your sequence against them and try to reach them, but you're going to give up after your 15 attempts or whatever. But if there's 3 people from that account, my advice is, the instruction is, get your ass in there and don't come home until you know what's going on. Right? If there's 3 or 4 people from that account, it just changes how you want to work that. So the simplest thing, get those leads attached to the account and then manually have the reps go look to see if they're there and then act on it. Ideally, you can automate that process with some coding and have those leads open up an opportunity automatically. You can do that with at least one of the lead to account matching tools, just match the lead directly to an opportunity. Or you could use a platform like 6 Sense, like our competitor Demandbase, that are able to assemble all of those signals in one place for you. And that's really what we think the future of that B2B marketing stack is. And frankly, it's why 6 Sense is valued at $5 billion now, because that's what we do. And that's really what the future is for B2B. It's seeing those buying groups, assembling those signals, and then operating off those. So a couple of those, you could do this at home yourself with simple tools like lead to account matching. It's not going to be as automated as you would like or foolproof, but it'll work and it'll improve productivity dramatically. The other thing I would say is, if you have second lead syndrome now, right? Go see if you're disqualifying the second, third, fourth lead from an account, and just stop that from happening. Doesn't mean the reps have to follow up on those, but get them attached to the account and make sure that sales knows when you have 2 or 3 different people from the same account. We can talk about all the other stuff after that, but make sure that no matter what, don't have second lead syndrome.
Thanks, Laura, for that question. And thanks, Carrie, for addressing it. Let's shift over to third-party intent data. How do you leverage third-party intent data to identify additional prospects?
Yeah, there are a couple of things about this, and I've been covering the intent space for the last 6 years or so. Authored a thing we call the intent data framework at Serious Decisions. Last year at Forrester, we updated it to what we call now the buying signal framework. And that term is one that I really would love all marketers to be thinking about. What are the buying signals? Because that's what intent data is. The big mistake for the intent vendors, actually, Sixth Sense was one of the primary companies at fault early on, was saying, here's intent data. We can see who's out in market. Give these to sales and they'll be great. And this isn't cold calling. And that's just absolute nonsense. It is cold calling. If you don't know who the people are and you're just seeing an intent signal, it's cold calling. And it doesn't work very well. What we like to see is if you've got a third-party intent signal that says we think this account is in market, that's a great signal for marketing, to focus marketing spend on that set of accounts where you see activity, right? If you have a big addressable market that's measured in thousands of accounts, then marketing to all 1,000 of those accounts, or 2,000 or 3,000, is probably not a great use of money. But if you can see which ones are actually making signals of being in market and focus your spend on those, that's going to be a much better use of money. And then your job in marketing is to drive those intent, third-party intent active companies to engage with you directly so that you can better assess whether they're in market and a good fit. So that's what we really like to see, is understand who's in market, focus your spend on them, get them to engage, and now deliver those more engaged accounts to your salespeople. Now that's not always possible. For a lot of organizations, you're not going to get the engagement as much at first as you want. You're still going to have to deliver some of those other ones. But that's the idea, is let's get more and more of that. Use that intent to drive engagement, and use that first and third party engagement, that interest, to prioritize accounts for the sales team.
Thanks. There are a lot of people on this call that are field marketers that have responsibility over events. Tell us a little bit more about the special role that events play in this whole conversation.
Well, typically people who attend events are often a little more serious than people who just go look at a white paper or something like that. So it's still generally, as a signal, a better signal than somebody who's just looking at content, especially if those people actually attend the events. The other thing, though, and this second lead syndrome is probably like the worst evidence of second lead syndrome is event lists that have, if you have 100 people at an event, and what you very often will see is like 60 of them are onesies, where they're the only person from that account who came, but the rest are not. And this is what I love about event registration lists, is you can just see it so clearly. You can see so clearly. Here's a bunch of people, they're off by themselves. I've got one person from IBM. Okay, well, that's nice, but if one person from IBM comes to your event, IBM is not buying something from you anytime soon, right? But if you have 5 people from IBM who show up at your event next week, that's like a holy cow, something is happening here and we have to do something about it. So, one of the things I've loved about those is that it's much more visible typically to, especially the field marketers running these things. They notice when you have multiple people and generally respond in the way that you would want, which is like, oh, wow, there's something happening here. We got 5 people from this account that we're going at. So to me, that's like the model of what we should be doing with all of the rest of our lead signals, is noticing when we have multiple people and then prioritizing those accounts where we have multiple individuals for follow-up that is more intensive and more goal-driven. Like if you have multiple people from those accounts, there is something happening inside that account. Now, it may not turn out to be a buying process that you can compete for, but there's something happening there, right? And you have to get into that account, find out what it is. And I just, with event registrations and attendees, because it is a stronger signal to begin with, when you see multiples of those signals coming from the same place, absolutely drop everything and make sure that that gets handled. And don't let second lead syndrome get in the way of seeing how those things are followed up. Install robots instead of humans in your sales process. So the way to avoid it is to change to flip the conversation around. And flipping the conversation around means, look, I'm not going to try to take credit for your deal. And if you cover a relatively small number of accounts, I expect that when something is going to happen, but also you have a lot to do. And there are a lot of accounts that you could be trying to sell, a lot of signals that you could be looking at. And what we're doing, especially with syndicated content leads, with notice you mentioned TechTarget's priority engine, is we're able to show you, we may have 10 people through some content syndication that are looking at content related to what we do right now, and none of the 10 are the people that you want to talk to. Totally get it. We want the person that you want to talk to, but what we want to do is look at those 10 people as evidence about how much time and energy you, sales rep, should invest in this account. And if you see the same person coming in through 5 different syndicated content channels, that person is everywhere looking at your content. Integrate is a tool that a lot of our customers use back at 6 Sense, but being able to bring those contacts together, and this is what Priority Engine allows you to do, bring those together and say, here's a group, right? This isn't just one person in isolation looking at this content. Here's a group of people looking at this content. That is, for you, sales rep, a signal. You can tell me that you already knew about this account and all of that. Great. Now I can help you understand how to prioritize it, because there's a lot of activity against that or not as much. And that helps you as a sales rep understand. I'm not trying to take credit for your deal. That's not what we're going to try to do. And wrote a lot over the last couple of years about the fallacies of marketing source attribution. It's terrible for everybody. So we're not trying to take credit for that. What we are trying to do is help you understand how to prioritize your time, how to fill out that buying team. If there's going to be 15 people involved in buying your solution, and we got 7 of them right here, that's going to save you a lot of time as a sales rep. By opportunity, everything now Serious Decisions in Forrester is opportunity centric. That was something I and my colleagues worked very hard to cause to happen over the last few years. The lead-centric view, unless you sell to a buying group of 1 or 2 people, the lead-centric view is going to produce the wrong answers in understanding where you should spend your time, and also what worked, and also the cost of generating that opportunity. So, if you want to know the cost of generating the opportunity, if you generated 5 or 6 different unique individuals who came to your website, whether they filled out forms or not, what I want to know is there a relationship between 5 or 6 people and whether that opportunity closes, or just one person and does that opportunity close? How much does it help sales if I get more engagement from those accounts, right? So it's really flipping those metrics around. Like, literally did a presentation for a Serious Decision Summit called "Why Your Falling Lead Conversion Rate is a Good Thing," right? And the reason it is if you're doing more targeted marketing, just like I was talking about earlier, and more people from those accounts come, your conversion rates are going to go down. Your cost per lead is going to go up. The deal sizes are going to go up faster. The cycle lengths are going to be shorter. It is what's going to work, but you can't measure it by those old metrics. They don't tell you the truth about what's working. We got to get away from measuring ourselves that way.
Andy, you asked one about 20 minutes ago, Andy Smith from Laminar. Would you like to go off mute and ask your question, please?
Yep. The question was about a new cookie, legislation, et cetera, and its effect on de-anonymization.
So there'll be different answers from different folks, and this is still not a settled question. Even at Google, they don't really know yet what they're actually going to be doing. But I can speak for 6 Sense right now, because this is what we do for a living. Is a really important thing for us. The way that we built our algorithms, we're looking at a number of different, there are things besides cookies that can help you identify folks. So machine IDs and all kinds of other metrics that help you understand where somebody is. We saw at the beginning of the pandemic a drop of, I think, a handful of percentage points in our ability to identify folks when they moved home, which is a lot like, the post-cookie world as a kind of a test case, because when people moved back home, they were no longer behind their firewalls. So we didn't know where they were at first. But we only had a really small drop in identification of visitors' companies, because we have such a big database that looks at a number of different signals and triangulates back to where those folks are coming from. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, we're going to have to know what Google's going to do and what's actually going to happen before we can really answer that question. In the meantime, organizations have to get very good at the first party data. I think everybody feels that right now. And if you have really good first party data and your own cookies on your own website, ultimately, you're going to be able to identify the buyers that you're interested in. But you're probably not going to be able to target third party. You're not going to be able to target visitors to other sites as well. And it's going to be less precise getting impressions in front of people who haven't been to your website and who haven't agreed to cookies on your website. It is going to be less precise. How much less? To be determined.
It's a good question.
I would say again, the better job you do surrounding those organizations that you're interested in and getting them to come to your website, even if they come anonymously, the better chance you're going to have of identifying which buying groups are in market. And things like, the tech target and those, the priority engine, those kinds of things are going to be helpful as well.
So in summary, pay attention to those signals, right?
The broader of a base you can build with the signals that you're looking at, the better off you're going to be going forward. And I think the main thing about intent, third-party intent, first-party intent, the anonymous traffic on your website, and your leads, they're all just layers of evidence. They're signals of the same thing. And we've got to, the more we can bring those signals together, the more powerful and accurate that signal is going to be in driving what we do. And we're not going to be able to spam people as much. All those things are changing. It's all going to be for the good. But so if you're paying attention, then now's the time to get it changed.
Wonderful, Kerry. I'm sure we could keep going all day, and it seems like the audience would keep the questions coming.